back to another episode on the Speak podcast. Barisha, better known as Bree, your host for this podcast. You know what Speak stands for: special people encouraging a kid who have gone through trauma, bullying, suicidal ideations, considerations, even attempts. And we here at Speak Podcast, we want our children, our youth, our kids to live again, to speak up, to speak out, to speak from within. As always stated, if you are contemplating or having thoughts of suicide, you can text 988 and someone will be available to help you. This is the Suicide National Hotline. Someone will be available to help you. And as stated before, we have our very special guest who is a licensed professional counselor, Ms. Coletta McPherson, back with us again. We hope that you enjoyed the previous podcast episode about trauma. It was so much to talk about trauma, but we're going to bring her back again. And trauma, this is a part of who we are. We are talking about the trauma and bullying and suicide. So you're going to hear a lot about, those things that happens to all of us. So today's episode is about bullying. Woo! Bullying it exists. It happens to all of us in some kind of way, some form, fashion.
Yes.
As being the bully, or you've been the person who was bullied. So, hey, how are you?
I am good.
We are back again.
And I am so glad to be here. And it's interesting that we're talking about bullying. This came up a couple of weeks ago at a community event that we both were in attendance at. And I thought it was an excellent question from a parent who was there with his son. And he mentioned, is anybody doing anything about bullying?
Wow. Yep.
I think that you said something just a moment ago. Bullying comes in all different areas. Sometimes when we think of bullying, we just think about verbal. But it can be physical bullying. It can be emotional bullying. And the end results is that the impact that it has on an individual's mental health.
Yes.
And I don't know if people really tie bullying to mental health, but it does.
I think it's happening now.
You think so?
I believe, and I can do some research on that, but yes, it is.
Yes.
It is.
Well, and one of the things that I've found over the years, just in working with individuals, but also in research that I've done, is that bullying looks different with children as opposed to adults. Some people would say that some parents have bullied their children.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And when you think back, that is definitely.
Let's talk about that, because parents, I'm not a parent.
Right.
But you just made me think of some maybe parents that doesn't realize it's bullying. They're thinking that they're parenting.
Right.
And they're thinking they're wanting to make sure, in a sense, that they have that respect from their child being the parent.
Right.
Yes. But it could be bullying.
It can be looked at as bullying when you think back, when it's threatening. Bullying makes you feel fearful. Some parents use that style to control their children. Part of bullying is controlling, feeling a need to be in control at all times.
Oh, yes.
It's not uncommon to see it in adults. A lot of times we think about it, and we think about kids, and it does happen with kids. And the impact that it has on a person's self-esteem, what they look like, how they feel about themselves, it impacts their ability to function as far as their education. I guarantee you there are individuals who are on IEPs because of bullying. It has caused so much distress for them emotionally. And again, we don't see those things. Sometimes I think we as a whole, we just don't look close enough, and we're missing so much with our kids.
And bullying may be mislabeled.
Yes,
It may, if in terms of getting a diagnosis, as
definitely.
oppositional defiance.
Yes, excellent point.
Mhm.
Excellent point. I
Mhm.
would say probably 50% of the people who have been diagnosed with oppositional defiant, they've been bullied,
Mhm.
or they
Mhm.
are bullies.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
They are bullies.
Mhm.
Some of us can be bullies and we don't even realize that we're bullying.
Okay, now you stepping into my territory. I can remember when this was back in like 2013, around that time. I was a bully, but I didn't
Mm,
realize. I was a bully on the work on the
okay.
job. I was in a position as a director of an agency that I worked for, but I was the director in operation director over the agency in the rural area. So kind of like it was my own, in a
Right.
sense, agency. And so for me, with the
Hmm.
perfectionism that I had,
Right.
with trying to meet certain standards from my
Right.
superiors, and hearing how, oh, Barisha's office is not going to, thrive. It's not
Right.
going to be successful. I then became like a micromanager,
Mm,
which in terms being a bully
right.
because wanting certain things
Right.
done at a certain time, but it was the way of how I communicated
Right.
that, or the way that I kind of put the pressure
Hmm.
on my team to have things done so that we can look good for the other,
Right.
for the superior.
Right.
And it was, when I look at it, that was bullying.
It
I
was.
was I was bullying
It
my team.
was.
I can
Yes.
admit. I'm not a bully now today, but I
Yeah,
can admit.
but I think, that's a great example.
Mhm.
And my thing is sometimes that does come again from our childhood experience,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
and it begins to show up in so many other ways.
Mhm. Fear.
Fear,
That was the root.
fear.
It was fear of failing.
And
It
that
was.
is the case with most people that are
Mhm.
bullies. And I'm
Mhm.
talking about kids, you know. Um, Parents used to, and I'm sure they still do this thing about you don't let anybody push you around, you know,
Yes. Yes.
or if anybody puts their hands on you, this is what you need to do.
Mhm.
And so kids are programmed to you have to bully somebody else before they bully you
Mhm.
almost.
Mhm. And you see that when you hear about, like, on national news,
Right,
the the shootings,
right,
unfortunately, in the schools, and
definitely.
from another student,
Right,
and that child,
right.
if you had the opportunity to really speak to that child,
Yeah,
they would probably say that they've
right.
been bullied.
They would say that. I guarantee you that. And my thing is we all are capable of doing things we say we would not do
Mhm. Mhm. Until you're pushed.
until you're pushed. And
Mhm.
fear is very, very powerful.
Mhm.
I think people continue to underestimate that.
Mhm.
Not making excuses when you have those type of shootings in school, but I think you're 100% right. If I am in fear of my life, then I'm going into protection mode for
Mhm.
me.
Mhm.
Somebody else bullied me, you know, you can even bullying is a part of domestic violence. And you see that.
Mhm.
You see
Mhm.
that in relationships with teenagers.
Mhm.
You definitely see it in marriages. And then, one of the spouses ends up murdering the other one. And they
Unfortunately.
say the person continued to harm me. You know, we do whatever we need to do to protect ourselves,
Mhm.
especially when that fear sets in. You know, it's not uncommon as early as the age of 5 from the research that I've done that you'll see bullying.
Mm.
It begins at a very young age.
Mhm.
Bullying between siblings, that happens.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, They generally say around the age of 10, it increases.
Wow.
Kids begin to speak their voice. They begin some of their bullying behavior as a result of what's going on at home.
Mm-hmm.
If daddy's bullying mommy, then you're going to see this little boy at school that's bullying all the little girls.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I just thought of something you mentioned in your research. Bullying can start as early as a 5-year-old.
Yes.
And I'm thinking about seeing a child acting tough,
Right.
acting as though they can, or
Oh,
even
yeah.
using
Right.
profanity,
Right.
and adults are around,
Right.
but the adults are laughing,
Right.
and they're boosting this
Right.
child on to continue,
Right.
like to continue to do that, or they're giving them like affirming
Right.
this child to be tough, or oh ha 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 ha, you
Right.
seeing what he's doing, and the child
Right.
posing, with
Right.
this,
Right. Yeah.
this stance as though I am tough, I'm cursing you out, but the adults are laughing.
Right.
And that's leading to like a
Definitely. Yes.
bully.
And we're prone to see more than likely everybody or most people have experienced some form of bullying in their lives.
Hmm.
And sometimes you didn't even recognize it.
You can find bullying in the churches.
Definitely.
You can find bullying in the malls or
Right.
grocery stores
Right.
with the cashier or the
Right.
drive-through.
Right.
You,
Right.
it's so unfortunate.
It is,
Oh my
but
gosh.
it's real.
It's real.
I
It
have
is real.
a cousin that's going through some things with her siblings, and when she processes with me, she always says they keep bullying me,
Mm.
and they're all adults. And I said, well, what kind of behavior are you describing? She said, I feel like they're threatening me always. And I'm just like, okay, because I'm always interested when we use the word bullying, what does that mean to you? And I think we have to be able to define what that looks like. And I think your example of what happened on your job and you being the
Mhm.
manager, that is a form of bullying. I call that workplace bullying.
Yeah.
You know, I think
I
there's
can admit.
community bullying. I think there's school bullying,
Yes,
relationship bullying.
absolutely, absolutely.
I think it comes in all form. And most people, when it comes to bullying, it's verbal more so than it is physical.
It starts with verbal.
Yes, it starts with verbal.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that has such a major impact on your mental health.
Mm-hmm.
That destroys people's self-esteem. They come to work out of fear, expecting, okay, if I don't do this right, then the boss is not going to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
Or even, with kids, there are teachers.
And in my case, on the workplace, bullying, being the bully,
Mm-hmm.
mine was more of it was verbal, of course,
Right.
but it was saying like I'm going to do a write-up, but never did.
Right.
It was more like a threat, but never,
Right.
did the write-up.
Right.
And so for my team, they felt that I was threatening, in a sense, them because it was just talk.
Right.
And you can't just threat and then you're trying to keep
Right.
the camaraderie, the cohesiveness.
Right. And say we're a team.
We're a team, but yet if I fail to do this, you're going to get a write-up, but you never write me up.
Right.
So
Right.
that's
That's what bullies do.
Mm-hmm.
And but can you imagine if you were dealing with children? I can't even imagine for your staff what that felt like. So you take that same scenario and you put it in a school setting, and my thing is, who does a child go to when that's going on at school? They have this thing now about, I'm not going to be a snitch.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's so important to kids. And so that's something that they hold inside. But at the same time, they're almost living in fear at 10 and 12 and 13 and 14 years old because they're not sure how to handle this.
And also, if they can't handle it at school, you mentioned earlier, like in a home, you're being
Right.
told this is how you handle, this is what
Right.
you do. So if I'm being told, if you don't handle this at school, I'm gonna handle you when you get home.
And that's what parents will do. I mean, and I would have to say that's something that's gone through generations. And I think
Yeah.
that's still the philosophy. I
And
have
it's not necessarily a culture thing.
No, it's not.
It's
That's
not
across
one
the
race.
board
It's
too.
right.
I have a great niece, and if they see this, my nieces are probably going to say, "You didn't have to say all those things." But I have a great niece, and
Don't
she
say their
has, and
names.
she has two siblings. She has a sister, and her
Hmm.
sister is I think is older than her, but some boy was, as she said, messing with my sister, bullying my sister. So my great niece takes it in her own hands to, in return, attack the young boy. And I said, "Well, why did you do that?" She said, "Well, he hit my sister, so I hit him."
Hmm.
And so I said to her, "Well, that's not necessarily the way to handle that." She said her response was, "He should have never hit my sister." So she's protecting again.
Hmm.
I'm protecting mine.
Hmm.
And that's what we all do at the end of the day. If I push you in a corner, Bree, you're going to figure out how to get out of that corner.
Of course. Of course.
And if you can imagine, you don't have a mature mind at 10 or 12. You
You have a
find you
survival
you have survival. You go into survival mode, and
mode.
it's just like
Hmm.
I gotta have a weapon.
Hmm.
And you find kids that take weapons to school.
Hmm.
Whether
Hmm.
there's a shooting or not. You don't. I can't even imagine the number of kids that probably have a weapon in their backpack if they can get it in there,
Mm.
because I have to be prepared at
That's
all
unthinkable,
time.
but it's real.
But at the same time, we're destroying their self-esteem. So they grow up and they feel like they have to live their whole life in
Hmm.
survival mode,
Hmm.
or with this attitude, I'm going to hurt you before you hurt me.
So bullying affects your self-esteem,
Definitely,
and the root of bullying is fear.
definitely, definitely.
One of the roots is main root maybe
It's
is
fair.
fear. And so your self-esteem has been affected, is damaged, your ego and all. And so how for children who speak on the bullier, the person that's doing the bully
Hmm.
and the person that's being bullied. Like, what can the person who's doing the bully, how can they look within themselves or find themselves? Or
Hmm.
I know with help you
Right,
can, to stop
right.
bullying. And
Hmm.
then those who um, are experiencing bully,
Hmm.
how can they process it and what steps can they take?
Uh, I will speak on that, but let me say this very quickly.
Hmm.
Um, it does affect their mental health, but it also can create a lot of academic challenges
Hmm.
for them.
Hmm.
You begin to see the grades drop, or they lose total interest
Hmm.
in education.
Hmm.
Their purpose in going to school is totally for a different reason.
Hmm.
I think it's hard for someone who's doing the bullying to recognize that that's what they're doing. I think, like you described, it just becomes a part of what they do. And maybe somebody needs to explain to them what that means. Again, I don't know how we educate our kids without addressing bullying. It's just as important as mental health. It has to be a part of what they learn at school. It has to be built into that.
Hmm.
Because how do I know that I'm a bully if somebody hasn't taught me that, or explained that to me, or walked me through what that looks like? And so I don't know that. It's years later when I figure out that's what I'm doing. But bullies are bullies because they have a need to be in control.
Mm.
It becomes a control issue. And then you go from control to feeling like I have to have power over something and somebody
Mm.
at all times. But who teaches about bullying in school? But it needs to be taught. Most parents don't recognize it,
Hmm.
or they'll describe their kid as being tough, or he doesn't take anything from anybody,
Hmm.
you know, and then the child will say that I don't take anything from anybody, or they'll be in the principal's office and you say, well, why did you do that? Because I wanted to.
Hmm. Hmm.
They don't understand their behavior, and we don't take time to explain their behavior to them. But if you're teaching that as a part of, what they're learning, then maybe I'll get that. I'll say to myself, oh, wow, that sounds like me. And that's not what I want to be,
That's good. That's good.
and the person who's being bullied, um, generally you can identify those individuals. And by that, they will be the ones that appear to be depressed or they're sad or they're very withdrawn. Those kids, um, they are operating in fear at all times.
And you can also see it as someone being a comic,
Yes,
making things always
right,
jokingly,
right,
or making a
right,
joke out of things, or
right,
the checking.
right.
I don't know the new words
Hmm.
today, but my time it was checking. It could
Right.
be something different
I
now.
think that's it.
So,
I mean, one of the things I see a lot is anxiety
mhm,
as a part of the bullying, because
mhm,
anxiety comes from me not being comfortable in any setting.
in any setting.
And you see that with kids a lot of times. It's
Mhm.
like they got to keep moving. And of course, I have to address social media and how that impacts even bullying.
Mhm.
Believe it or not, there are websites where you can go to that teaches you how to be a bully.
Oh my. Oh my.
Yes.
Really?
And as you know, this particular generation, they believe what they see online as opposed to what they hear you say.
Right.
That makes a difference.
It does. Wow.
That
So,
itself is a challenge.
wow. This conversation, we can go on and on because bullying is a part of mental health. It is a part of
It
that.
is.
And that's what this podcast is about, is to encourage those. And we know people are being bullied,
Yes.
and our children, our youth, our kids are either bullying someone or they are being bullied as well. And so we want to, keep them encouraged. And for those who are experiencing that,
Right.
let's wrap it up with you sharing what they can do, and then we're going to end.
I think one of the most important things that an individual, I'm speaking to young people now, is to let someone know.
Mhm.
I know that the big thing now is I'm not a snitch,
That's true.
but there are ways to inform someone what's going on with you, who's bullying you, without you being a snitch. It's important for your mental health.
Hmm.
Parents, we have to begin to recognize we have to ask the right questions to our children when they come home in the evening, not just how did your day go.
Hmm.
It has to be a little deeper than that because we have to help them to recognize we cannot depend on the educational system to educate our kids on certain things. Bullying is major.
Hmm.
We have to take a role in helping our kids to understand what that looks like, how that's impacting their lives.
Hmm.
And I know we're not talking about suicide right now, but that leads to suicide.
That does.
Yes,
Thank you.
you are
And
welcome.
we're going to continue the conversation and talk about suicide. So keep tuning in, keep joining us, and come back with us as we go into our next episode about suicide. So we are Speak Podcast, special people encouraging a kid to live again, to speak up, to speak out, to speak from within. See you next time.